Does this seem familiar to you? You run into the barkeep. He's a dwarven man who... Insight check. Or how about this? The sitting room of the Marquise Alton is lush with furs and trophies from all... I search for hidden doors. This video is about working with a table that doesn't seem to trust anything that happens. A little bit of skepticism and caution is great for almost every adventuring party to have. But if your group is constantly second-guessing every NPC, overanalyzing nearly all situations, and picking apart every single detail of a room in your game, things can grind to a halt and become a lot less fun for everyone. So what can you do if your players just don't seem to trust anything that's happening in your game? First off, I would suggest setting an expectation for the table of when something like an insight check is warranted. In a lot of games, people tend to use insight as a sort of polygraph test. Insight can, and I think should, have more subtle uses as characters try to glean information about little things in a person's body language or tone of voice, facial expressions, and so forth. Also, it's good to establish that asking for an insight check should have a reason. I don't have a reason to insight check the guy at Target who tells me where batteries are. Right? That's a person who has that job. I ask them a thing and they give me an answer that is well within the realm of what I'd expect to hear. So in your games, if things aren't out of place when dealing with an NPC or looking around a room, things like that, then there might not be a reason why an extra insight check into that person's demeanor would be called for. This advice is kind of similar to the video I did on you're using deception wrong. A lot of overlap happens there. If whatever's happening is within the realm of what you might expect, then it doesn't make sense to delve deeper. Also, as a GM, I think you can just let your players know that in most cases, you're taking into account their passive skills, their passive perception, or their passive insight, and that active check will be less often needed or applied. Another tactic when running a game for a group who always seems to interrupt the narrative and the flow of the scene in order to scrutinize the situation is don't just ask them what the character is looking for, but why their character felt the need to delve deeper in this instance. This can, in my experience, lead to working through the scene in character and without roles. It relies more on collaborative role play instead of just fishing for good numbers on the dice. A big thanks to all of our patrons, but especially to Tucker. If you like what we do here and you want to be a direct part of making this happen, then head over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative and check out the perks of being a patron. Before I get to my final suggestion, I'll let you know that my personal preference for how checks and rolls work is that I try to give players plenty of chances to roll in order to determine the degree of success in the moment. Now, yes, sometimes there's just a target number and it is pass-fail. But often in my games, a low roll just means that the success wasn't as good as it could have been. And my players tend to know that, so I think that it gets rid of some of that metagaming where, oh, I rolled a 5, that means whatever that NPC says must be a lie. Personally, I just don't really like it when players at the table are calling out for checks, yelling, insight check or things like that. I think that it feels out of character and pretty meta. I try to encourage players to ask things like, well, what's the bartender's overall demeanor or vibe? Instead of just yelling insight check, throwing a d20, and then calling out the score before I even have a chance to respond. My last suggestion in this case, like a lot of the tips that we have, is communication. Talk to your players. Before or between sessions, bring things up. Ask them, or ask the individual if it isn't the entire group, why do they keep doing that? Why do they keep calling for checks and doing so with every new character they meet? Maybe something happened earlier in the game that you weren't aware of, or in other groups that that person was a part of. Maybe it's just a habit, or maybe they don't even realize that they've been doing it. And also just let them know how it makes you feel, that it makes you feel restricted in your storytelling, that it's slowing down the game, that it's bogging things down, and that it's interrupting the story that you're all trying to tell together. See if you can come to a compromise, something that lets the players feel like they're still able to gather the information that they want to, but it doesn't bog down the game with lots of rolls and, more often than not, metagaming moments. Have you had groups that are constantly demanding rolls and making checks that you didn't call for? Do you find that frustrating, or do you think that it's just a part of the game? Do you use insight as a lie detector, or do you have it be something that's a little bit more nuanced? Let me know how you use things and how you've dealt with this situation in the comments below. Until next time, I'm Ryan, and this is Roll for Initiative. Bye. Go away.